IVM.
Hi, I'm Satyajit.
Hi, I'm Rachita.
Welcome to Paperback by the Open Library Project.
We have as our guest today Aditi Surana. Aditi is a graphologist, high-performance coach, and host of Absolutely Right podcast. In the first half of the episode, we discuss Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi and writing analysis and how she started her own podcast.
In the second half, we discuss Synchro Destiny by Dr. Deepak Chopra, Mindset by Carol Dweck, Was That Really Me by Naomi Quink, and The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by Oliver Sacks. Happy listening.
Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I'm reading a paragraph where he speaks about stress. There are 3 points. I'll be reading one of them. Why are some people weakened by stress while others gain strength from it? Basically, the answer is simple. Those who know how to transform a hopeless situation into a new flow activity that can be controlled will be able to enjoy themselves and emerge stronger from the ordeal. There are 3 main steps that seem to be involved in such transformations. First, unself-conscious self-assurance. Second, focusing attention on the world. And third, the discovery of new solutions. I'm going to read the first one. Unself-conscious self-assurance. As Richard Logan found in his study of individuals who survived severe physical ordeals, like wandering alone in the jungle or concentration camp inmates, one common attitude shared by such people was the implicit belief that their destiny was in their hands. They did not doubt their own resources would be sufficient or not to allow them to deal with their fate. In that sense, one would call them self-assured. And yet, at the same time, their egos seem curiously absent. They are not self-centered. Their energy is typically not bent on dominating their environment as much as on finding a way to function within it harmoniously. To take a trivial but common example, suppose that one cold morning when you are in a hurry to get to the office, the car engine won't start when you try the ignition. In such circumstances, many people become so increasingly obsessed with their goal, getting to the office, that they cannot formulate any other plan. They may curse the car, to no avail, turn the ignition key more frantically, slam the dashboard in exasperation. Usually, this all does not work. Their ego involvement prevents them from coping effectively with frustration and from realizing their goal. A more sensible approach would be to recognize that it makes no difference to the car that you have to be downtown in a hurry. The car follows its own rules, its own laws, and the only way to get it moving by taking them into account. A better way to deal with the problem could be to call a cab or cancel the appointment and find something useful to do at home instead. Unself-conscious, self-assured attitude happens when a person no longer sees himself in opposition to the environment. As an individual who insists that his goals, his intentions take precedence over everything else. Instead, he feels a part of whatever goes on around him and tries to do his best within the system in which he must operate. Paradoxically, this sense of humility, the recognition that one's goals may have to be subordinated to a greater entity, and that to succeed one may have to play by a different set of rules from the one he would prefer, is a hallmark of strong people.
How many times have you motivated yourself to improve your sleep, or lose weight, or be more productive? How many times have you failed? Hi, my name is Ashton Doctor. Tune into my show, The Habit Coach Podcast, where we focus on creating small, tiny habits to improve your life instead of those big, impossible tasks. So make listening to me a habit every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com or on your favorite podcasting app.
Welcome to Paperback. by the Open Library Project. I am your co-host Satyajit, otherwise known as Onion Knight in most food circles. I'm hosting this podcast with my co-founder at the Open Library Project, Racheta Sharma.
Hi guys, my name is Racheta. I'm an ex-banker, social impact entrepreneur, podcaster, writer, publisher, and inveterate learner. The Open Library Project is a curated library service which is offered to corporates on a subscription basis. The idea here is to curate knowledge and develop a growth mindset amongst our members.
We have as our guest today Aditi Surana. Aditi is the host of the Absolutely Right podcast on the IVM network, and in addition to being a graphologist and a high-performance coach. Hi Aditi, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you.
Great to have you on the show.
I'm so excited.
Same here.
Yes.
So, before we get into anything, can you tell us about Absolutely Right and how you kind of got into podcasting and what the podcast is all about?
So before I get there, let me tell you that, words, writing, reading have been my, I can say, love of my life now, but I'm a dyslexic. So a thing that I hated and I struggled with as a child the most. So the journey with words have kind of become like the underlying theme of my life, if I look at it. And Absolutely Right, as the podcast is an extension of what I love to do, that is graphology. So I study people and have been extremely curious about knowing them, understanding the nuances of their personality and what exactly works for people, what does not. And handwriting became my tool to understand them, analyze them. And the podcast is where we analyze people and we talk about their personalities. And that's what it's all about. So, so many times we build perceptions about ourselves and we believe I'm like this or this is who I am because my mother said so, my father told me, my teacher said that. We have no way to know what kind of person we have become. Like in different walks of life, and we behave differently. So it was important that there is some mirror to look at who we are and why we think the way we do. And writing becomes that mirror for us to look at it.
Wow.
Nice. So I should send you a piece to analyze.
Can't wait.
I'd love that. And also tell us, so, what has been your most beautiful interaction so far on Absolutely Right with, where you've really discovered something wonderful in a person and they didn't know about it?
So we call the show Absolutely Right because most of the time that's what people say when I analyze them. And I have this theory that I walk into a show with no preconceived notion.
Right.
So my idea is to jump in and figure it out. So I'm as much struggling as much as the other person is because we don't know where the choreography of this is going to go, right? It's a complete pre-format thing. So I was speaking with, I think 2 shows really stood out. Every guest, and we have been only doing podcasters till now. So every guest has been so comfortable with the medium. And there are so many things to say and all reactions were like so genuine. But Rachel, who has a podcast, I think Wordpecker.
Right.
And yes, and she was phenomenal. She's a journalist and an artist. And she loves words from a different angle altogether. So we had a blast because we kept speaking from our angles on it. And Aisha Amin, who also has a podcast, Agla Station Adulthood.
Okay.
She freaked out. She freaked out. She's like, this can't be true. You cannot do this about me. You have gone through my phone. So that was very, very dramatic.
Nice.
So, just curious, like, how much of a person's personality or like can you delve from their handwriting? Because I don't know how much it could be.
So there are 800 permutations and combinations those 26 alphabets offer us to look at personalities from. So they are like really complex. You look at the spaces between the alphabets. You see where the alphabet begins and how it ends. The pressure points. So, even if you may think your handwriting is changing, it is such a complex study that it is constantly giving out information about yourself. And I always say this, handwriting is only one of the ways. The way you dress up, the way you sit, the way you eat, what you eat first and what you eat last, all of it is talking about you all the time.
Right.
So handwriting is one of the ways in which one can figure out the personality. I feel it talks about, I can't say how much part of your personality, but I would say many, many areas, deepest truth, real secrets, things that you otherwise cannot fathom, all your decision-making style. So it is like a floodgate. Once you open it, you don't know what is behind it, because we are all woven similarly. You know, all people have similar fears and similar challenges, but the story and narrative is always different.
True.
So
Absolutely.
that is the beauty of
Absolutely right.
it. That's great.
So I had shown my handwriting for analysis once, and I write like my handwriting is very like big and spaced out, lots of gap between. So I write
And
like
also
3
circular.
words. Yeah, round, circular.
I can feel it, because the way so we call it ornamenting the stroke. When people actually have that circular stroke, they tend to make everything more colorful, go in the layers of every expression, and I feel you speak like that, so I can guess that your handwriting has that.
And I was told I love space, which I think was absolutely right again.
So the biggest struggle we have when we start the conversation, whether handwriting works or not. So it's like you go to a doctor, like, are you sure your medicine works or not? You're like, yeah, it works. Let me give it a try. Let me show it to you. So this is where the overall subject is at as of now.
Yeah.
So that's why we
As
thought
long
of
as
starting
you,
a
like,
podcast.
look at it, with a broader perspective, it can be quite interesting to, find out all these facets. And we don't have to take it like literally that this is it, but I'm sure it gives a, fair idea of your personality.
I'm also thinking too. So more than anything else, if I'm, as a coach, I always ask better questions when I have something to rely on. And something as graphology being very accurate, I get to learn a lot about the person.
Sounds like you have a superpower when you walk into a room with, when people have written things down, because you have all these insights into their personality, which just by looking at the handwriting sounds amazing.
But imagine how difficult it is to visit a bank. Like if I go there, I keep looking at everybody's signature. It's like awkward, but it is true. So
I have a question. Why do doctors have such bad handwriting? What is the relation between doctors and bad handwriting? I really, really want to know.
So I think I've spoken to many doctors and I've asked them, confronted them with this question. They say that they're very, very busy and that's why they write illegibly. But that's not true, because illegible writing means you prefer quantity over quality. Okay, anybody who does that. The idea, people say, my speed of thinking is higher than my speed of writing. Not true again. It only means that you want to reach wherever you want to reach and you don't care how you reach there. So I have met many doctors who have great handwritings, which are legible and proper. But unfortunately, that is happening to our medical industry.
Yeah.
People are so busy reaching where they want to reach and the quality has diminished. So I feel it's only representing that. But their excuse, another one, they say we don't want the patient or a wrong person to read what we have written. And then I wonder why.
Yeah, like if they make some mistake, they'll be like, this is not what I meant.
Exactly.
Nice. So you read an excerpt from the book Flow, and it's by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi.
Oh my God, you got it right.
Yes, I love the name. Very, very interesting. Yeah. And so is the book. So tell us, what really stands out for you in this book, and why would you recommend it to people?
So flow as a concept, I think all of us at some point in time have experienced the idea. We have felt it. It's just that we never looked at it as an important area of our life. But flow is not only enjoying the moment. It's enjoying it, but also stretching yourself a bit more than wherever you are. And I think that's fascinating because at every moment you are negotiating, you're learning something new, you are becoming a better version or better skilled person in that area. So that when I read it for the first time, and I actually discovered Mihai Csikszentmihalyi on a TED Talk. And it blew my mind because the way he spoke about it, I'm like, oh my God, this guy knows the whole idea. And it began as a curiosity project for him. He was looking at different people and he said, what got people so good at what they were doing? What made some people excellent and they kept thriving and they never stopped out creating themselves? Now, when I saw that as a concept for me personally, it had a strong connect because I love studying high performers. I feel based on graphology, I keep collecting handwriting samples and I keep seeing their personality traits and what you can do to change your behavior to, become that was my initial inquiry why I became a coach, I think 10, 12 years ago. So I found a lot of resonance with what this person was saying. I'm like, I have to read and I have to study. So in last 6-7 years, I have studied it so much. I've spoken about this book. I have used it in my coaching. So it's very, very close to my heart. Now, a few things that I always feel one should look at when it comes to flow is pick up a task and figure out why you feel so turned on by it. It's kind of flirting, it's slightly sensual, it is at the same time intellectual. It has so many aspects. If you are in a flow in any activity that you pick up, it becomes one of the most amazing experiences of your life. And I feel, lucky are those who have experienced it, and luckier people are those who know how to trigger themselves into a flow. I feel that is a pursuit, right? Like you wake up every morning and say, oh, I know how to trigger myself. It does not happen every day to me. But you always attempt and you always try to get to that point. So in Sanskrit study, we speak about this as an Anandamaya Kosha. We have 5 koshas and fifth one, Anandamaya Kosha, is where you literally operate from the space of flow because whatever you're doing, it has similar chemical composition to it. So one part of it is your experience and your emotional journey, but other aspect of it is the hormones that you secrete and the experience that you have at a physical level. More you do things, so it is not about making things easy. It is not about making things simpler. It's actually about making things complicated enough that your attention stays with it. Which is where the flow happens. And I feel that is so crucial. We are so used to looking at life, at least the new modern idea of successful life is where you're sitting on your couch and doing nothing. Or watching Netflix and chilling. Whereas in ancient times and also for people for whom flow matters, the idea of a great life is where you really step up. And you're constantly learning and you're enhancing your relationship with what you do. There's so much to learn from this concept. More I speak about it, every time I speak about it, it opens up new doors. The closer connection I found to this book was with a concept called Ikigai.
Exactly, I was just going to get to that. So they've actually really quoted the book many times in Ikigai. And it's
you read the Ken Mogi one? Because I think Ken Mogi is a big follower of the flow book. So he keeps talking about it.
He's quoted it multiple times in the book and just about, how Japanese love everything they do, even the daily mundane activities, how they bring a state of flow, whether it's, washing utensils or it's cooking food, they have a state of flow in which they do things. So I was definitely going to get to that. Please go ahead.
So Ikigai is also similar in this context. So flow talks about how can you intensify your learning and how can you keep at it. And the process becomes your satisfactory area, not the results, but the process. So the fact that you are attempting, that is the victory. If you fall, that's okay. If you win, that's great. If you move forward, amazing. If you don't, look at what you can learn. And imagine anything that you pick up operating from that perspective. Be it cooking, reading, writing, podcasting. Imagine day filled with so many areas where you're not necessarily getting into flow, but at least attempting flow. So I feel you're at a voluntary space with it. You're not driven by what you have to do or what you should be doing and what other people are expecting. But you, in your mind, you're building this slow game where you're like, okay, I did this like this. And I try that angle. I think when driving, all of us do that, especially when nobody's sitting in the car.
How does this wheel go the other way around?
Exactly, right? Like we are constantly like figuring our relationship at our style.
Yeah.
But with not with many things, I don't find people doing that with many things. So the connection between flow and ikigai is something I found very beautiful. It's kind of a transition, and you are in a way enhancing your challenge. You're making things, and in ikigai there is a concept called kodavari. Kodavari is your personal standard of excellence, which to my mind is flow. It's not only external standard, but personal standard of excellence.
And especially, so I started reading Ikigai during the COVID period. And that's when I even got interested in flow. So I was very happy that, you're going to discuss the book today. And I really realized that, this is the best time to start practicing something like this, because we really have to live in today because COVID gives us no other option. You don't know you don't know what's happening with the economy or with work or, what your next step is going to be. So you're really living in the now, and it's a good chance to, so like when I'm cooking now, I try to get into that mode that, okay, let's see, I'll take it one step at a time and what the result is going to be like. And it's a nice time to practice it right now, I feel.
I think it's a nice time to get your muscles trained. And then when we go back to the new normal, as everybody is saying, we are all ready to experiment with, this thing in our everyday life. That would be so cool.
Yeah. A description of flow and reminds me of what one of my favorite entrepreneurs, Gary Vaynerchuk, he always says, you gotta love the process, man. It's not about the end goal. It's about, you gotta love the failures as much as you love the success, because you're learning so much, right? You're learning why you failed and why you were an idiot most of the time.
So true.
It just resonated with me when you were saying that. And, it's amazing that when we talk about, Cheta and I have spoken about so many books over the last few years. It's amazing how so many books resonate in the same way through different perspectives. It's just fantastic. And this book, Flow, it's I think something we all may have experienced, like you rightly said, at some point in life, but we never realized that that's what we were experiencing.
Also, we are not taught how to cultivate that as a behavior. We are not encouraged to do things only because you are completely absorbed with it. So, including my father, when I told him that I really love graphology and this is what I want to pick up as my career, he's an art director. He has been like an offbeat professional of his time. But with my career, the fatherly instincts took over, and he's like, no, you can't do it. No, I want to do this. Like, this is exactly what I want to do. He said, no. If you choose to do that, you can't live under this roof. And I said, okay, if that's what it takes. I was 18 and I said, okay, I'm going to do it. I left my house and I became a professional. I was forced to become a graphologist because that was the only thing I knew. But that was literally, and it was not as scary choice at that moment. Now when you turn back and you look at all the practical aspects, you're like, oh my God, that happened. But in the moment, because I loved, graphology put me in such a state of flow that for me, there was no option. For me, it was like the obvious truth to pick up and walk, because you're like, this is out of this world and I want to do it for life. So
Amazing. So who would you recommend this book to? Who is this an ideal book for?
So I feel anybody who's reading Ikigai must read this.
Definitely.
But I think anybody and everybody. It's slightly technical because he's a psychiatrist, so he kind of brings in a lot of concepts. So if that is a little heavy for you, begin with a TED Talk and get a hang around the concept. But he gets talking about the practical ways of implementing flow in your life, which can come handy. Slightly psychological read, but eventually it is something that, so the reading this book is not as much flow as experiencing flow. So yeah.
Great. So on that note, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back after this.
Hey everybody, welcome to another awesome week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money and Intel. We appreciate their support. It's been a really fun week, guys. We've had some great episodes on your old favorites. Cyrus Says, Advertising is Dead, Edges and Sledges, Football Shitball had a really fun episode as well. Definitely do check it out. I'm sure you're going to enjoy yourselves. And with that, let's continue with your show.
Welcome back, guys. We still have with us Aditi Surana, host of the Absolutely Right podcast on the IVM network. Hey Aditi, what a fantastic first half.
Thank you.
I hope everyone picks up the book, because this flow state of being is something you can only experience. And once you do, you're just going to chase it forever. So, so the next book we're talking about is Synchro Destiny by Dr. Deepak Chopra. So tell us a little bit about this book. How did you happen to pick it up, and why it kind of stands out for you?
So Dr. Deepak Chopra was in Bombay and he was speaking. He was launching this book in Bombay. So I happened to go for his lecture without knowing what I was getting into, without knowing the topic, nothing else. I was just fascinated to meet him. I was, I think, very, very young back then. So I got the book and I read it, and I didn't understand first half of it because it's all quantum physics and different concepts where he brings science, Indian mythology, and consciousness together. Eventually, I read the book 2-3 times to understand. It really makes sense, but it took some years for me to get my head around it. But the second half of the book becomes very practical, where he talks about how you can explore your own intuition. Some point he speaks about existential questions and why we do what we do. Right. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. My love for Sanskrit kind of became more meaningful with this book. Like I love studying Indian philosophy and scriptures and things like that. But this was a turning point where he got new age science with this old connection with different concepts. It was very, very.
It's happening more and more often where they're going back into the Indian texts and finding things that are synchronous exactly with new modern science, right?
Exactly, and this book is about that. It talks about how we think destiny is this fixed idea, but it is not, and we are constantly in engagement with our destiny by synchronized coincidences.
And it's great because you can always get back to such books, and you'll always find something new the next time you read it. So that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, especially when you don't understand it the first time.
I think it takes not just reading the book like a couple of times. Like I found this with some other books as well, which were technical, where I had to personally grow as a person to kind of understand what was being taught about in the book. Because
I totally agree. I can't agree more on this. Yes.
It's like the state you're in life kind of guides your understanding also of.
Totally.
So, who would you suggest this book for? Like you said, it's a little technical, and but is it worth it to read it 3-4 times?
Only if you have this curiosity about your existential questions. Right. Yes, then you can. Right. Otherwise, I wouldn't you don't pick it up out as your easy read. It's not easy to pick it up.
Great. So the next book that we're moving on to is Mindset by Carol Dweck, another one of our favorite books. We've spoken about it.
Yeah.
We've discussed it a couple of times on the podcast as well. And
wonderful.
Again, in kind of parallel, I would say, with flow, where it's kind of getting yourself into the right mind frame and mindset to get things going.
And also, again, the continuous improvement. I think, we again and again come across this point. We don't have much choice to decide what is in front of us or what is served on our plate. But we definitely have a choice about how we react to it, how we deal with it. And I thought growth mindset was an underlying thought of that book was this, that you make sure that you are continuously growing. And no matter whether you're growing 1 inch or 1 centimeter or 1 kilometer, it doesn't matter. Your growth is dependent on your mindset and not the, so again, process and not the destination. So I think it just connects to what we spoke in flow.
Yeah, there's actually a beautiful link through all the books we're talking about today. So I think anyone who's interested in either one could, go for the others and like enjoy.
Yeah. It's like Amazon recommends.
Yeah. If you like this book, you can also read.
In fact, the Open Library Project, one of our underlying principles is that we try and help you develop a growth mindset by kind of making the right books accessible to you. And we always tell corporates and people who like use our service, it's a lot up to the individual or the corporation to push the individuals at times to develop this growth mindset.
That's
not something we are told to ever do. Like in schooling and even our work life, professional life, it's rare that people tell you that, develop these skills, or it's just related to your work. But honestly, you want to develop as like a whole individual, there are many different aspects you need to develop, not just your professional capacity.
That's so true.
Yeah, fantastic book and really resonates with us because of the Open Library Project.
So you have to actually implement, being entrepreneurs that you are, you have to really implement all the lessons from the book. I can totally feel that.
We had like a lot of learnings.
I can imagine.
And more feelings than learning, but we're still learning.
But as you said, as Gary said, there are no wrong turns. Every turn is a meaningful one.
Absolutely.
I love to say that, because a lot of my friends and peers, we're at that stage in life where we're questioning, like, should I change my career? Should I change my path? Is this like what I want to do for the rest of my life? And, I'm always telling them, because I've taken such an unconventional path in my businesses, it's that, it doesn't matter the path you take. There are like a million paths you can take to get there. It's what you choose that path to be, right? And
of course, and how you interact with it. If you're on the growth mindset or a flow mindset, it doesn't matter. Once you're on this path and when you start growing, no matter what you do, you start implementing the same lessons everywhere.
Yeah.
As Rachita was saying, like I love cooking, and in cooking I think about it. Now that's going to happen. Like,
I just about started loving cooking. Let's put it like that. But yeah, when I left my banking career to do something I love, I feel that kind of satisfaction that I got, it's something I always crave now. So I want to keep growing. And if it means, taking a difficult step, taking that risk, taking that chance, I'm always up for it.
Now there is no going back. There is no going back. After tasting this, everything's just going to be pale and bland. So no going back for you.
That's absolutely true.
And so the next book that we're moving on to is by Naomi Quenk. And the name of the book is Was That Really Me? So tell us a little bit about this book.
It's a slightly technical book. If you're a therapist, if you are into like some form of counseling, this is applicable to you. But it's one of the very, very important books for me. So I mentioned when you asked me for the list, because it speaks about many a times when we go through emotional crisis, we change and we behave in a manner that surprises us. They're like, oh, was that really me?
Yeah.
How could I say this? How could I behave like this? So there is this technical aspect of Carl Jung's psychological model underneath this book. So again, it is a therapist book, but very important one, because most of the time we fight about it, right? Like we are like, yeah, but I was angry, so I just ended up saying it, or this was upsetting, so I behaved like this. Now, all these behaviors are already coded. So if you are one type of a person, you will react in another type. So it's actually correlated. It is not, you won't pick up any option. You'll pick up the option that is available for your type.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of very technical, but very interesting and revealing book. I feel I love knowing the patterns underneath personalities. This allows you to understand the pattern, and then you can just predict it, and then you can break the pattern. So that's why it's good.
So, is it easy to change? This is again a question for you, since you're so like, how easy or difficult is it to change behavioral patterns? Once you identify, like I would ask, like, how difficult is it also to identify patterns, and how difficult is it to kind of change these patterns into things where you will want to change your personality or, change your reactions to things?
So I feel that is very, very crucial. If you can identify it correctly without, coloring it with your interpretation, when you can look at it for what it is, it becomes easier for you to change it and alter it.
Yeah.
So that is the toughest part of it. And most of us cannot do it for ourselves.
Right.
And our loved ones can't do it because they have their conclusions about us. And this is where, that becomes a challenge. So the neutral process is important. I think all of us, in order to flow and growth mindset, we have to constantly evaluate where we are. And that requires that neutral framework to look at ourselves. So that's one very crucial. But after you identify it, if you're willing and if you have right kind of tools, then one can change behaviors. I have seen people changing behaviors with complete dedication. But it doesn't change just like that, for sure. It requires, because any behavior is built by neuro pathways that are created because you think in a certain manner again and again over the years.
Right.
Yeah.
It just can't disappear. It will take time for you to build newer pathways.
Yeah, absolutely true. In fact, we've discussed Sonia Lyubomirsky's book. She talks about the how and why of happiness. And even she talks about, that knowing is just half the battle, but then you can definitely take steps, like daily steps to make yourself happy. Like you can train your mind to be happy, and it's not as much, not in our control as we think. Like you definitely can play an important role in trying and, controlling your mindset and your happiness levels. So
it comes down to right tools and it comes down to repetition.
Yeah.
Both of them are very, very important. So you have to kind of outnumber the previous behavior through your body, through your mind, and then you can make the shift. Without that, you keep falling back on the old one.
And the neural pathway will be the new one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, she mentions that you should get up in the morning and you should spend, say, 10 minutes writing about things that make you happy or you were grateful for, or at the end of the day. And I used to find that very pointless. I'm like, I have to sit now and think about, I don't want to think about what made me happy and forcefully write, I think this made me happy. But I think what it does, it puts you in this sort of mindset of looking for positive things in your day because you want to, at the end of it, write it down. So you're actually concentrating on positive things through the day. And that's how you're building that mindset. And now it makes sense to me. But at the start, it felt like I can't train myself to feel happy by writing things that make me happy.
Yeah.
But,
you had me on writing, by the way. My secret mission is to get people to use handwriting more. Because if we do that, we have to slow down, we have to calm down, we have to pay attention to what we are doing, and we can't multitask while using handwriting.
Right.
So all these things we require a lot more than, swiping right and left. So I think
very well put. That's right. So the last book I think we're moving on to is The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by Oliver Sacks. Very funny. So tell us a little bit about this book. How did you happen to pick it up? I mean, it's quite an interesting title. I would have picked it up.
Yeah, for the title, nothing else. I didn't know Oliver Sacks then. Just for the title, I picked it up. I'm like, who is this man and what exactly happened?
What was he on?
Yeah, exactly. And how did he survive after that? So I picked it up and these are his observations in his sessions. And I can't tell you how beautiful it is and how thought-provoking he becomes, because he brings in those observations that otherwise you notice, you want to talk about it, but you can't because you can't discuss your client. So most of the time you're like, oh my God, this happened and that eyebrow moved like that and the conversation went here. You cannot discuss it with anybody. But he gives you an access into his therapy room and you become like a fly on the wall, listening and observing what he observes. And I think that's a treat. Michael Jackson said this. He said, it's the biggest honor to observe a master in his full form and doing what he's doing at play. Yeah. So and Oliver Sacks is one of the greatest minds one can say when it comes to writing and also doing the therapy that he did. So being able to observe his observations and being able to, be present with it, I think it's a treat. So again, a therapist's book or a writer's book, either ways. Like if you like those kind of observations, and I love absurd observations in anything. So I would be walking on the road and doing exactly what he does in the book. I just got encouraged. I'm like, oh my God, there are people who think like this and they write about it. I think I'm okay.
That's what the thing is about, great writers or like writers who become great. It's like you found resonance with the weirdest or most random things that they do with the rest of the world. And that's
exactly.
Why,
So I must say the podcast idea of Absolutely Right also came from that space because we do a live session.
You were flowing.
Sorry?
You were flowing.
Flowing, yes, but also this particular one where you give the listener an access into your real-time session. So people are asking genuine questions, you're exploring emotions which are raw. And I feel, passive learning, observing other people going through an emotional journey is very, very powerful. Like we don't get to do that. We do it only in movies, and that's why stories and movies stay with us, right? We remember them. And when we are dealing with a problem, you remember that character that, oh, Shah Rukh Khan did that in that movie. So that those correlations are built only because we are passively observing other person's emotional journey.
Right.
So Oliver Sacks does the same, and we are trying to do the same for Absolutely Right because
that's great actually, because not only people are talking about it, but they're talking for other people to listen, which is only encouraging. So I think it's really great what you're doing. And
thank you.
Yes, everybody, please do tune in to Absolutely Right.
Thank you. And I can't wait to have you guys on the show. It would be like such a cool conversation. Like we'll all of
now that I know I'm a colorful personality, I'm happy to come.
Okay, my writing is very illegible, so I don't know now.
You just want to get to the end of it, so now we know.
I got some insights.
You already got them in passing. I didn't know. I thought I was only talking about doctors.
I was just thinking of myself, like, no one can read what I write. But we'd love to be on your show, yeah. It would be a great experience. And when does it air on IVM?
It's on Wednesday and Friday. We have 2 episodes. One format is where I interview people and speak about it. And the Friday episode is we take one topic and I tell you how to resolve that issue or how to enhance it. So we did one on flow, another one on Ikigai, because you want to imbibe such skill sets, but you don't know where to begin. So you break down and you give people ways to go around it. So
awesome. And I got to say, your book suggestions, fantastic, especially for this climate of COVID when we're all in a restarting phase. I think it would do everyone a little bit of good to get this information into their...
But I must say, I feel I've been like preparing my entire life for these 3 months. We started one initiative for anxiety where we asked people to journal, and the whole idea was to write your anxious emotions. And we did 21-day Instagram live free workshop. Again, going back to the point that everything I was speaking about, I felt I speak about this every day. It's just that now people are finding it relevant because suddenly they're pausing and re-looking and thinking, I'm like, good, perfect, I was preparing for it.
I think this is the implementation part of it after we've known it. So, great.
So thank you guys for your project to begin with, because I feel people are going out of the habit of reading and more than reading, also pondering and internalizing, which is very, very important part of reading through books. Because if you do an audio book, you don't internalize as much.
Right.
So it's so cool that you still believe in the old school book style reading and internalizing. So cool.
To be honest, I feel like you gain so much more by reading a physical book in its entirety, rather than like just reading the summary or listening to the summary, because that's when you read the whole book is when you resonate with different parts of what the author is saying and other things that stay with you.
Also, to add to your point, when we have a physical book, the sensory and tactile association is very, very different, which people are missing. Like when you have only screen to communicate with, your memories and wiring, which we call like neuropathways, are built in a similar fashion without creating nuances and depth and variations to it. You know, like your any palette, food palette, music palette gets evolved when you have variety and you have exposed yourself to the variety. When you read a physical book or when you physically write, exactly the same thing happens. Your memory gets woven differently. So that's why a physical book also remains with you and you remember those words and you remember that paragraph with a memory of a smell, you know, like aroma coming from the kitchen. All of that gets woven together because in mind, in physical space, in a brain space, whatever is wired together, fired together is wired together. So all the memories happening that you're aware or unaware of get wired together. And that's why the experience and the memory is colorful and it has so many layers to it. So,
and we found a flow between the open library and your handwriting analysis.
That's so true, actually.
Great. It was great having you on the show, Aditi.
Likewise.
It was really, really meaningful content. So I'm sure our viewers and listeners are going to love it. And
thank you so much for having me over.
Thank you.
Big thank you to all our listeners. You can follow the Open Library Project on LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook for latest updates on our events, and stay tuned for the next paperback podcast on IVM Podcasts. Happy reading. You can follow IVM Podcasts on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at IVM Podcasts. Listen to Paperback on the IVM Podcast app, website or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Advertising is dead. Yep, you heard me right. Advertising is dead. We're all in the content business now. Let's not call it news, TV, radio, etc., etc. It's all content, and we're in the middle of this weirdly exciting phase where all the borders and lines that have been drawn over decades has been swept away by this lovely thing called the internet. We're a show where we don't dwell on just the stuff that is now, but rather the wider stuff about advertising, media, content, and the whole goddamn circus surrounding it. Tune in every Tuesday for our weekly unboxing of the mystery box we used to call advertising. I'm Varun Dugirala, co-founder and content chief at The Glitch, and this is my new podcast, Advertising is Dead.
Are you constantly seeking happiness? Wondering how to make the most of every day? How not to let your inhibitions stop you from achieving your goals? It's now time to get your A-game on. It's time to unlock your true potential. Tune in to the Empowering series with me, Zarina Poonawalla, to feel empowered in all genres of life. From behavioral skills to management skills. From health to relationships. From mental well-being to emotional well-being. And of course, your finances. I've got you covered. With these tips and tricks from me, Zarina, and true life stories from my amazing guests, you're bound to bring your purest to the table. Tune in to the Empowering series with Zarina Poonawalla every Thursday on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you listen to podcasts.